Fellas, today we're going to be covering who the worst fighter for each martial art in the UFC is. Now, I did a video a couple months ago, weeks ago, whatever, about who the best fighter for each martial art in the UFC is. So I'm going to do the opposite of that, no, doing the worst fighter. Now, a few things I want to clarify is I'm only going to be including the four main martial arts, which is boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, and wrestling. I don't have listen, if you can't expect me to include every single martial art. If I was to include karate, it'd be the same as kickboxing. If I was to include sambo, it would be very similar to the wrestling option. So I'm going to be including the four main martial arts. And there's going to be a lot of disagreements in this video because there's a whole bunch of fighters you can choose. But I'm going to be choosing, in my opinion, the worst fighter for each martial art. And the final thing I want to clarify, as I'm only going to be including like ranked fighters, like top ranked fighters or popular fighters, because if I was genuinely going to choose the worst fighter for each martial art, it'd probably be a bunch of unranked fighters who no one's ever heard of. So I'm including the main ones, and I'm going to go in there with boxing. The worst boxer in the UFC for me is Paddy Pimblett. I think he's the worst boxer in the UFC. He's been outstruck in pretty much every fight besides his debut. He got tagged on the feet by Jared Gordon. He got caught early in his fight with Vargas. In his debut against Luigi Vendramini, he did manage to KO him, but he almost got knocked out. There was a time when Luigi Vendramini clipped him and Pimblett nearly got knocked out. Even against Jordan Levitt, when Jordan Levitt fought Pimblett, he was not a striker at all. He was a pillow fist wrestler, and he still managed to hold his own against Pimblett on the feet. Now, I know that Paddy Pimblett's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, but his hands are genuinely terrible, and his defense is even worse. If you watch him fight, he's got this really arrogant style where he keeps his chin like up in the air. Paddy Pimblett keeps his chin up in the air. He doesn't move it. So one time he's going to fight one of these strikers in the lightweight division, and he's going to get clipped, and he's going to get caught, and he's going to get KO'd. I think we can all agree, if Paddy Pimblett, the longer he fights, the more chance there is of him getting KO'd. So for me, Paddy Pimblett has the worst boxing in the UFC, or at least the worst boxing at a high level, and everyone in the top 15 at lightweight outstrikes him, man. He's been calling people out. Everybody in the top 15 outstrikes him. Imagine he fought Ilia Topuria. That's just one thing I want to say. Imagine Paddy Pimblett got booked against Ilia Topuria. He would have got put to sleep. He would have got knocked out in the first round. What's his name? Ilia Topuria, one of the hardest hitters, hits like a truck and genuinely has great boxing. Paddy Pimblett, he's got good kicks, I'll give him that. He's got decent kicks with range, but when it comes to pure hands, Paddy Pimblett has none of them. The only person he's been able to put out on the feet is Luigi Vendramini. Like I said, his kicks and his knees are actually pretty decent, but when it comes to pure boxing, he's just not that good. And he's got terrible defense. He's more of a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy. If he ever becomes ranked, it's because of BJJ. He's not going to become ranked because he put someone to sleep. I can almost guarantee that Paddy Pimblett, unless it's with like a kick or a head kick, he's never going to punch someone to sleep, in my opinion. Not even in my opinion, let's be honest, it's not going to happen. Even against Tony Ferguson, he's probably going to get finished by Ferguson. So for me, Paddy Pimblett, the worst boxer in the UFC at the high level, and that's the thing about Pimblett. He's been calling people out. He's been calling all these highly ranked guys out, and honestly, it's just a shame that he's calling these people out, because if he ever gets matched against them, he's going to lose. Bobby Green, people have been saying Bobby Green versus Pimblett's a competitive fight. No, it's not. If Green and Pimblett were to fight each other, Bobby Green would he'd box the head off him. He'd box the head off him, man. I don't know what it is with Paddy Pimblett, but he just can't strike. I feel like Paddy Pimblett would be at least 10% more intimidating if he just got rid of the haircut. Maybe that's a factor they need to consider. But when it comes to pure hands and pure boxing, Paddy Pimblett for me is the worst boxer at the high level of the UFC, or popularity level, because he's not ranked, but he's very popular and his boxing is terrible. As we've seen, he got outboxed by Jared Gordon. So I'm going to put Pimblett. Then we move on to kickboxing. This one's going to be quite controversial because this is a lot of people's favourite fighter. Colby Covington. He's a high-ranked welterweight. He's a high-ranked welterweight. In fact, he's going to be fighting for the belt next. And he has got some laughable kickboxing. His boxing is more volume, but when it comes to kickboxing, Colby Covington's just not good at it. He's really bad. You could also put Aljamain Sterling for this. There's a couple other people that you can put, but I'm going to go Covington. I just don't think he's that great at kickboxing. He's got pillow fists. He hasn't TKO'd anyone or finished anyone with his hands since 2016. And I'm not going to count the Tyron Woodley fight because that was a rib injury, and it wasn't even because of like punching to the rib. It was because he leant on the rib too much, and then his rib popped out. His last proper TKO was in 2016. He's got pillow fists. Yeah, so I'm going to go with Colby Covington for the worst kickboxer in the UFC. If he fights Leon Edwards and he struggles to take him down, from there it's just going to be a bloodbath from Leon Edwards. He's going to batter him every round on the feet. It's not even competitive. He lost to Kamaru. He got his jaw broken by Kamaru Usman, and Kamaru Usman's not even a good striker. I understand that he's got the threat of the takedown and he hits pretty hard, but when it comes to technique striking, Usman's not that great. Dropped by Masvidal as well, or maybe he was just taking a knee for the first responders. I think he just wrestles his way to a decision in every fight. That's what I think he does. I think he just wrestles his way to a decision in nearly every single one of his fights, like he did against Masvidal. The only fight where he had no choice but to stand was against Kamaru Usman. But yeah, if it wasn't for his wrestling, he wouldn't be ranked. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Listen, this is MMA. This isn't boxing or kickboxing. But he's just not a threat to kickboxing. He's not a threat on the feet. I think a lot of people unranked in welterweight could outstrike him if it wasn't for the wrestling threat. So I'm going with Colby Covington. Like I said, he's literally fighting for a belt and he can't strike. You could have gone with Sterling as well, because Sterling, he's also very similar. He's got a bit of an awkward style, but Colby Covington, his striking is mainly just so he can set up takedowns. So I'm going to go Colby Covington for the worst kickboxer in the UFC. Well, yeah, in the UFC, in my opinion, or at least at the high level of the UFC. Then we move on to wrestling. It's got to be Cyril Gane. If you're going to go with anyone but Cyril Gane, it's a complete lie. He got out-wrestled by Francis Ngannou, and Ngannou's not even a wrestler. Francis Ngannou is a striker. And I understand that Ngannou was probably training to wrestle and everything, and maybe Cyril Gane wasn't expecting to get wrestled by Francis Ngannou, but whether you are expecting it or not, this is MMA. And he got ragdolled by Ngannou, getting slammed by Francis Ngannou, and obviously John Jones absolutely mauled him and embarrassed him in a couple of rounds, but I understand that was John Jones, the greatest of all time. In terms of Sergey Spivak, he did manage to kind of avoid Sergey Spivak, but Sergey Spivak, he looked really off in that fight, and I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to take away from Cyril Gane, saying that he didn't look off because of Cyril Gane, but I don't know what it was about Sergey Spivak. He didn't go for the normal clinch and trips that he usually goes for. He just tried to shoot double legs, which I'm sure Cyril Gane has been, training for. He's actually got decent Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with Cyril Gane. When it comes to wrestling, he's terrible, but when it comes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he's actually pretty decent. But he is a 99 striker, 1% grappler. If you're on the feet with Cyril Gane, it's a long day. If you're grappling with Cyril Gane, that's your chance to victory. If he goes against someone like Tom Aspinall, I think Tom Aspinall, he has a chance on the feet, but his best bet is to try and grapple with him. And obviously, we saw what happened with John Jones. I honestly think Stipe could beat him if Stipe, if smart enough and tries to go for the takedowns. But I'm going to go Cyril Gane for the worst wrestler. He got embarrassed in March by Jones. Obviously been out-wrestled by Francis Ngannou, and he's such a one-dimensional fighter. Maybe we see something like what happened to Alex Pereira, where Cyril Gane goes away, learns grappling, faces a grappler, and manages to actually hold his own against a grappler like he did with Sergey Spivak. But I've just not seen enough from him, man. The fights that he's had to engage in grappling, he didn't look great, and the fact that John Jones took him down so easily, it wasn't a good look on Cyril Gane, and especially the Francis Ngannou fight. It was just 5 rounds of getting mauled and taken down. So for me, Cyril Gane is the worst wrestler at the high level in the UFC. Like I said, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is not that bad. He's good at finding submissions occasionally, but when it comes to pure grappling wrestling, he's not great. And finally, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I know he's not in the UFC anymore, but we've got to give him credit. Darren Till. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is horrible. Like, genuinely, Darren Till's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is horrible. I know he left the UFC a while ago, who cares, though. I'm going to include him. He's an honourable mention for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's just got no submission threat. Like, I genuinely think you put a white belt out there to grapple with Darren Till, and he still finds a way to submit him. I genuinely put, like, Rafael Fiziev against Darren Till. Fiziev wins by Darce choke. Darren Till's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is terrible, and I know his wrestling's not that good, but at least, like, I'm going to go with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for this. It's just 3 taps. You don't even have to fully lock in a choke. You can get a choke halfway in, and he's still going to tap. Dricus du Plessis, the second the choke was, around Darren Till, tapped. Derek Brunson, tapped. Tyron Woodley, tapped. His BJJ is honestly laughable. He can't take a submission, man. Whether it's a choke or a limb submission, I don't know. I don't think he's actually been in a limb submission. I think he's only been chokes. But either way, I don't know what it is about submissions, but he's terrified. And the things that shocks me about Darren Till, he trained with Hamzat Chimaev for 8 months. We all saw the vlogs. We all saw the training that Darren Till and Hamzat Chimaev was doing. And then he comes back against Dricus du Plessis, and we all expected Darren Till to run through him, just for him to have zero grappling improvement. And I know that loss kind of aged well, considering Dricus du Plessis is now probably going to be fighting for a belt within 1 or 2 fights, arguably the best middleweight in the world right now. But Darren Till looked horrible against him. His grappling looked like it hadn't improved at all. I know it was also part of his wrestling. I think grappling as a whole is terrible, but I'm gonna go with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu due to how many reoccurring times he gets submitted. Like he got submitted against Tyron Woodley. Derek Brunson does it next, and then finally for his last fight in the UFC, it was Dricus du Plessis. He's got no threat when it comes to submissions. You could genuinely be a white belt on the floor and take him down, and there'd be no threat of getting submitted. Yeah, Darren Till, decent striker, terrible grappler, and even worse submissions. His offense and his defense is terrible. So for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'm going to go Darren Till. But please let me know if I missed any fighters out for the certain martial arts, or if you have any other names that you can bring up. But that is my list for the worst fighter for every martial art in the UFC, and thank you for watching.